it's a compilation of a lot of work. You'll find 22 years worth of effort. And so I work on this with Scott Birch, who's the manager of our lab, but we have all of the people past and present within the ABL, including Bill and Matt and Chauncey and Dave Reagan and Jeff Rogers have been a big part of this. So the theme for the COB this year, by the way, this is my, this is the now for something completely different type of presentation. So there will be no technology, no code, except, well, there'll be some nice pictures though. So if our theme was around impact, I took that very seriously because that is something that's really important to us here at Indiana University. I'll explain why in just a minute. But so I set as the goals for this talk to foster thinking and discussion about how does one define impact, especially with a visualization lab. How do you go about measuring and demonstrating that? And how do you facilitate and hopefully increase impact? And like I said, we take it very seriously here. And it's not as if our lives depend on it, but in many cases, the future of what we do does depend on this. Because the organization, UITS, and I'll give you the whole breakdown of that in just a second, is very much committed to openness on what things cost and how good they are. So we go through an annual process called activity-based costing, which takes all of the services in very rough estimate or rough evaluations and determines what the cost of it is, what the units, how many things did you do, how many people did you help, how many systems did you support, and then finally how satisfied were people with that, and they put this all together on an annual basis. So it's like opening a kimono here. Well, actually the kimonos that are provided are more like hospital gowns. So there's no back to these, and so it's open. In fact, you can go to that URL there, or you can just Google UITS activities-based costing, and you can find this. These are the numbers for fiscal year 18, but you can go find it going back 10 years or so for all the different services within the organization. By the way, this year was particularly large because we did a number of installations that did bump up our advanced visualization systems number. But more about this later. The other thing you might have seen is in the displays around the organization we're part of, UITS, and the division, Research Technologies, has adopted a supercomputing for everyone theme. And this is, I think more metaphorically speaking, more an aspirational goal. We're not really talking about 100,000 users all having accounts on supercomputers, but what we are saying is that if supercomputing is equivalent to research cyber infrastructure, which includes things like visualization, then, and if everyone is interpreted as every department or discipline and everyone within those departments who is interested and motivated to it, then this is what we're going for. We're trying to make things as accessible as possible. One of the speakers earlier today was talking about democratizing access. And that's a big theme that we have. And in general, we try to minimize obstacles for use and adoption of technology. So just a little bit about IU and the organization and our lab. Indiana University, as Matt told you yesterday, is celebrating 200 years. Started as the Indiana Seminary in 1820. It has two major research campuses here in Bloomington and one in Indianapolis. It has 6 regional campuses around the state. And the last census is a couple years old, but 114,000 students, roughly 9,000 faculty, 11,000 staff. And there's over 230 different domains and departments. Within Indiana University, there is UITS. We're a 800-pound gorilla, or I like to say 1,100-pound gorilla, because that's how many staff members we have. It's a big university, and this is a big organization that does all types of IT support. So we have divisions that include learning technologies, enterprise systems, networking. You got, perhaps on the tour, you got to see some of those last night. This is our home here in Bloomington, and we have a nice facility up in Indianapolis. If we drill down a little bit more in that organization, we're part of Research Technologies, about 100 staff. In addition to the HPC and storage and consulting, our sister organization is hosting the HUF in the next, down in Alumni Hall. And then within my portfolio, we have the Advanced Visualization Lab, Research Data Services, Cyber Infrastructure for Arts and Humanities, that many of you met Tassie down there, and an emerging area of 3D digitization. And then finally, the AVL itself has been around since 1997. We started then with 4 staff, 2 on each of the major research campuses. We had a cave down here, a ImmersaDesk in Indy. We now have 7 staff, so not even quite double that, but we've gone from those 2 flagship facilities to 22 satellite facilities on 6 different campuses. So obviously, with that number of facilities and that number of people, we have to rely on a heavily leveraged support model. And our support should be relevant to all areas of IU's mission: research, creative activity, education and teaching, and outreach. All departments, all campuses. Again, we take this very seriously. And so we've evolved over the decades, where the first decade was really kind of figuring out what we were doing. Many of you, it sounds like, are in that situation where you're establishing a lab and you're trying to figure out what your mission is. And we're happy to share our experience with you if that can be helpful. In the second decade, we focused on getting stuff out of these central facilities because, as many of you know, that as great as these facilities can be, there's still obstacles to getting people to come onto campus or to travel across campus to make use of these facilities. And then if they're popular, they're scheduled a lot, and it can be difficult to get time if you're trying to bring a class over at a particular time and someone else already has it booked. And this, the next decade, we're looking at really expanding that utilization. So we've done a good job of getting the hardware out there. This is kind of one of the problems that we have as technologists. We're always technology first. We're good at putting it out there. We're not always good at following through and making sure we have the use cases and the support. So that's what our focus is at present. So, so again, the framing questions that I think are important is that it's been interesting to hear different labs and different perspectives, and that's really important for us to keep in mind. So a question is, what type of visualization lab are you or do you hope to be? Do you want to be domain specific? Are you in a school of engineering where you're focusing on just engineering or biomedical applications? Are you grant or contract funded? Are you trying to develop the next generation of things, R&D? Or are you trying to be broadly accessible to everyone in your university? What are your metrics for success? Is this publications, grants, number of users, hours, some combination of those, number of different domains that you've supported, and what type of users are you supporting? This is something we developed 3 or 4 years ago because we kept coming back and we didn't have the right terminology to talk about different types of users. And it's pretty simple. Types 1, 2, and 3. This is what we've always done. This is what we started doing in 1997 because there were no other options. There was only an SGI and a cave, and there was very little or no software to use. So if you wanted to do something, you had to write an application and you had to adjust the data to go with it. This obviously requires this has the most complexity, takes the most time. With many things, including low-cost, commodity software and hardware that helps with good quality software, much of it open source, and then things like VR and the Steam store and things like that. That really opens up new possibilities for what we call type 1, where you don't have to do anything. You just come and use the technology to do something in one of those areas: research, creative activities, teaching and learning. And then somewhere in between, which we find really to be kind of a good sweet spot, is people like that. They get started here as type 1, but then they want to bring in their own data, whether that be something they photogrammatize, some data that they simulate, or if something, just go out and take some 360 images and be able to bring them into VR. So with that in mind, we'll go through this real quickly, but we've been thinking about what do those user communities look like? And at IU, we're kind of thinking about this community of users as being on a scale. So we've always had the type 1s, and if I don't say this enough, the top of the pyramid, really type 3 users. This is what got us to where we are. We love these users. We want to keep supporting these users because we're a research university, and so this is a big part of it. And so we always want to facilitate that. But then we have the next level of people who are very curious. They want to take their teaching, learning, creativity to the next level. And then we have people who just need access to software that's easy to use. And then, of course, when we get out to outreach things, we want to also support those. So we want to be greedy. We want to really try to support everywhere. So I've put in, what do these different communities need? At the top level, they just need access to advanced tech and some advanced expertise, and people they can ask when they get stuck. This next level, again, where we put a lot of resources and time, is people need easy to use systems. They need them to be not in the cyber infrastructure building over at the corner of campus. They need to be in the buildings or close by to where they're teaching, where they're setting up an art exhibit, where they're collaborating with other scientists. The software thing actually ends up being pretty easy because they just need on-demand access to well-installed and maintained software. And we need ease of use also with when we do outreach types of things. So what tech will satisfy everyone's needs? Of course, the answer is a cave. Sorry, spoiler, not really. But this is where people start. This is where we started. It does, in theory, support all of these things. Or nowadays, we can also buy a couple Vives and do some goes and stuff, and we can also do a little bit for outreach. But in reality, this has a problem. This is still going to be hard to access. It's very complex. Even if you set aside the high cost of acquisition, there's still a cost for upkeep. And then the usability, again, especially if you're running across a cluster or you have very customized software that only staff member X knows how to use or develop. We can just lump these as accessibility issues, really. So there's a big gap between where people can start and, then the high-end facilities. And we say, well, if they start here, they'll learn how to use it. But man, that is a steep learning curve, going from, hey, I can grab something from the Steam store and this looks great. And then it's like, welcome to Unity. Let's crack open the script editor and dive in. And then really there's one of the biggest problems, there's an investment mismatch. We're doing a lot for these users. Again, these users are very important. These are often people who are bringing in grants and stuff. So again, we want to support those, but we'd like to sort of balance this out in some way. So how do we do that? So here's what we've done. And it basically comes down to looking something like this. And these are obviously very approximate, but we still want our flagship facilities. You saw what we call the Next Lab. Hopefully if you took the tour yesterday and saw some demonstrations there. Then across campus, we have a whole bunch of distributed visualization facilities. And we got something called Research Desktop, which allows us to take tools that are commonly used. And the reality is, part of our job is to force people into using these tools. It's like, well, but I know such and so visualization package. It's like, well, if you use ParaView, we can help you a lot better. So we make that trade-off, that decision there. And then look at web-based tools. So real quickly, what does this look like? Again, we started in '97. There was the cave and ImmersaDesk that I talked about. I just met the photographer who did this. This was two weeks after we opened the cave. Mikhail Gorbachev came, and we had two applications running. One was a simulation of the Mir space station that we put together. The other one was Crayoland, if for those of you who have a few years on you. And so this is Mikhail Gorbachev, the former leader of the Soviet Union, going through Crayoland. But they all spoke Russian, so we think they liked it nonetheless. We refreshed those in Indianapolis and down here in Bloomington. This is what we had in Bloomington before what you saw last night. And we got to a point now where we can, with these high-end facilities, we can actually self-integrate. So that gives us a lot of flexibility and allows us to save money. In the middle, we've been thinking about this idea of distributed visualization for a long time. We benefited from the works of others. The folks at the Electronic Visualization Lab at UIC were great with the GeoWall. We kind of did a variation on that called the Johnny Box. So there's one in a chemistry lab. There's one in a fine arts museum, actually showing some of Margaret's work. In 2009, we partnered with Idaho National Labs and did something called the IQ Station. There's a younger Bill in that image. We've been doing walls since 2004, but low-cost walls since 2009. There's younger Dave Reagan. And that was actually a Mecdyne product there. And Chauncey came up with the idea of doing a tile table that can do touch. And so we're still doing those. That's very popular. And we're, of course, are taking low-cost VR systems and putting them out in what we call reality labs. And we have some of those around campus. Addressing the software need, we leverage our partner group research technology, the research systems, and they take Big Red 2 and systems like that. They run a piece of software called ThinLink, so they can actually present a virtual desktop to users. So instead of having a command line, we can meet users, again, where they're at. So we have that. And then finally, we've done a number of things around how we think about reaching out beyond. So we are systematically using the web in a very structured way. We adopt best of breed software when available, things like Sketchfab, Matterport, Poly. These may have long-term sustainability problems, but right now they're very good. Again, that's what that lab used to look like. We have something called the Collectome that we've worked on thanks to a grant through North Carolina State University Libraries and Shelby's group there. And so we're actually going to be revealing that at Liberact. And then we use WebXR and WebVR. We're actually taking this one and showing it this Saturday. Even though we did it 4 years ago, it's still viable because we had the good thought to do it in A-frame and WebVR type things. So again, this gets us to this model, which we think is very, very helpful. And it's more balanced across matching resources to needs. And we look wherever possible, use common workflows and tools so that we're, these are not silos, but it's really a continuum across those. So, and I was just reminded and seeing some of the other presentations, Jordan's thing had pictures of an IQ wall that we helped the Envision Center put together. We did one at the Granger Library, we did one down at the Crane Naval Surface Warfare Systems. We're also sharing workflows for photogrammetry and stuff. So this again allows us, we benefited from being part of a community, and this allows us to give back to that community. So in a nutshell, let me just talk about two real quickly, and I'll skip over all the examples in the interest of time. What you've seen our IQ walls, what makes these different than other tile displays is that we only run them from a single Windows desktop. And then we allow anyone to log into them. So you can, again, preaching to the choir here, you know all the benefits of a tile display. But anyone who can go to one of these, you hit Control-Alt-Delete and log in thanks to ADS. And so we've got these all around. We've got 22 at last count on 6 out of the 8 campuses. And again, what do we do with them? Well, again, we can look at again those areas of the mission, those types of users, and you get this nice combinatorial explosion. But we get lots of interesting uses of IQ walls, especially going back 10 years now. PowerPoint's still very popular. This is a fun one. The student is from Eastern Europe, a professional tennis player. She got her degree from IU East. She did a virtual graduation. A reporter called and asked, "Oh, is this why you put in an IQ wall so that they can do remote graduations?" And no, but this is the nice things, the type of nice thing that can happen when you get out of the way. You enable people, you set it up, you let them use the tools that they know, and then surprising things can happen, including a transcontinental graduation, collaboration, and so on. We tried the same approach with our reality labs. where again, we can all do one of these. We said, well, what happens if we put 10 of those in a room that's already dedicated to teaching, and will that happen, or will good things happen there? Of course, that's a posed photo there. Again, we have something on the order of 70 around in 12 different locations. It looks like this. And again, there's lots of examples that I'll skip through in the interest of time. A particularly interesting one being here. Somebody started by using Google Earth. They were studying Monte Alban, which is a ruin in South America. They first studied it in Google Earth so they could get the complete context. And then that same group had actually done a photogrammetry drone survey of it, and they processed this on our supercomputer, but then they were able to bring that in and zoom in and do some more examples. So that was kind of nice. They started as type 1 and then moved to type 2 and type 3. And so that's a particularly good one. Architecture and stuff. And then of course you saw the flagship facilities. You've seen Chauncey's pipes in action. Here's some of the reconfigurations we can do with that wall. Purdue's can reconfigure as well. So Laura, let us know when you guys are ready to move that around, and we'll be glad to help. And again, you've seen some examples of 3D digitization, so I won't go into that. But this is something that's emerging, and we want to be careful to make sure we get that started on the right track. So let's share some lessons here. This is what we promised to get to. We found that the IQ Wall initiative has been very successful. How do we know? Well, one thing, this is, people are asking to have them built. They're coming out of the woodwork. They're saying, hey, I've got a space, I've got some tech staff that have to be there to support it. I've got money. Sometimes they only have half the money, and so as a tech organization, we might meet them halfway on things. And they're also committed to using it in their curriculum. They want it for some particular reason. So the last panel was talking about having skin in the game. So people are coming, they're offering skin. And then we could also observe the usage, and all these rooms are scheduled, so we can actually look at the Outlook calendars, very fancy analytics there. We can see that it's working. Why is this working? Because we're actually finding that the reality labs aren't working as well. So why? So why do these work and reality labs aren't? Well, one is just a big Windows desktop. And we've taken care to not do mean cluster. So everything you already know how to do on a Windows system, you can use, except it's higher resolution, it's bigger, it's more impressive. And because it's just a big Windows desktop, the IT pros already know how to support it. They've got dozens or maybe hundreds of Windows workstations in their labs. So they're like, sure. In fact, we thought they might be resistant to having another system to support. Most of them find it interesting to do something other than replace toner cartridges and update Microsoft Word. So that's good. We still have some challenges there. One is how to get, we get a lot of PowerPoint. And again, this is part of the strategy. Let's embrace that, because at least people are working in venues where they can collaborate. They can bring in multiple technology. They can slide the PowerPoint over, show a web page, a Google map, so they can start to leverage that resolution. But can we transform some of those users into more sophisticated users with something more advanced or more innovative? And then we're working on building out those communities, especially as we got, we think about that map of Indiana, and we got, a lot of those are just one IQ wall. So how can we bring those together and get people communicating and sharing ideas across departments and campuses? And again, we can look at our activity-based cost. You go back a couple of years, and we had 15 systems. We're now up to 32, and Scott, what was it, 36, 35 this year. So again, so that number is going up. Might cost some more, but from the university's perspective, from the organization's perspective, we're doing the right thing. We're getting the technology out there. We're getting more users. And again, we can also look at things like consultations. How much does that cost? How many hours do you spend on each one? And I'm happy to go into more details on this if you like. We also can go into the Outlook calendar and do some simple analytics, and we can show people, when we did that 105 room, they said, oh, do you really need to? Because you've got that one in the CIB. No one even uses that one in the Innovation Center. We're like, oh, do they? Well, thank you, Microsoft. We went and pulled out their calendar, and this was the number of events that was there. And we broke down by duration. Now, again, not all of those were visualization things. but hey, versus, and many of you have talked about, say, using a cave as just a backdrop to some other types of things. And again, we're in the game if we have this sort of thing. So it shows that impact. What about reality labs? Well, these were different. We have some examples too. We saw some new users, but not very many of them were kind of the same old type 3, type 2 users. Some of the problems we think we made perhaps a mistake by putting them into STCs where there's already classes in there, so there's still an accessibility issue. Even with STEAM, I have a PhD in computer science now. Chauncey, these things are still too damn hard to use. So I think that's part of it. And what's happening is you can't really see what's going on. And while there are collaborative examples, these are technically, they're just sort of in a closed room and such. So we think there's some problems. We think AR might be something that can help this. But anyway, so we need to build up more type 1 and type 2 users. We need to sort of totally rethink our investment in that. And things like Oculus Quest, can drive down from $3,000 to set up to $400. Okay, now that might even be that you don't have to have as big of an impact because you haven't put in $30,000. You put in, $5,000 to make something possible. So again, we want to get this right for 3D digitization. So let me leave it at this here, the lessons learned. Again, I consider myself a technologist, but technologists love tech. And so deploying tech is relatively easy. Hey, if we got some money, we could set up a reality lab here. We could put an IQ wall there. Try to avoid getting caught up with that. Even finding the money is easy. Really building community and training people is the harder part. But again, think about what are your goals at the beginning of the project so you're making the right decisions. Again, meeting communities where they're at. We talk about Microsoft Windows and web apps, and so this has been a key to success for IQ walls. We talk about repeatability and scalability. Yeah, this package is interesting, but if you could use ParaView, you could tap into all kinds of expertise. Plus it scales, plus it runs in stereo, and we can make it run in VR, and it works great on IQ walls, et cetera, et cetera. And then, like we said before, making sure everyone has some skin in the game. But anyway, I know that was a ton of stuff, but again, the idea was to get you all thinking about impact. So anyway, here's our URL. Sorry, that turned to blue, but, and we have a general email address, bizhelp@iu.edu. So any questions, or maybe we need to move on to the next one? And
I think we have time for questions.
Hi. I have a question about the IQ wall. What's the interaction mode with the IQ wall? Is it still keyboard and mouse, or?
Some are keyboard and mouse. Some we have tracking on. They've made them we have them stereoscopic and tracking, and then some we've added a touch overlay on. Especially the shorter ones, so that people can reach.
So how is it? It's driven just by a stack of graphics cards out of one box, or is that?
Yes. Yeah. So it's good. So we're not going to claim optimal performance, but again, back when we had caves, we were like, how many people actually took time to optimize their code, and it was like less than 10%.
Yeah, well, it's probably faster than Sage or something like that, and it gets you away from the cluster management.
Yes.
All right, that's it. Thanks.
Okay, thanks.
May I get a copy of your presentation?
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, he was asked for a copy of the presentation. We're Zoom recording all these, so you can actually re-watch the presentation too. But I think we'll have the slides up as well. Okay, that would be wonderful.
Yes, and I think and can you tell people how they can get the presentations or the Zoom recording?
I don't know yet. So.
Okay, we'll figure that out for tomorrow.
A really quick question, if I may, or did I miss one? I really enjoyed your presentation. Thank you. You really presented an institution that's got a very joined up compute visualization and all sorts of digital resources, vision, and not just a vision, but something that's implemented. And I just wondered, has it always been that way, or has it taken time for some sort of digital innovation strategy to evolve? And how did that go?
We were very lucky in just at the time when we were starting the Viz Lab. we hired the first vice president for information technology, who now happens to be the president of the university. So, so I think he had a lot of the vision for, you know, let's drive this. Let's remove obstacles. That philosophy of abundance, and Michael McRobbie, and so he's been key to doing a lot of that. But you know, now that he's president, he doesn't spend time with this. But you know, so the rest of us has sort of followed on and taken that mission. So you know, it might be that there's just one or two key people at a pretty high level who can set that vision to, you know, to get it going, and then it takes a lot of hard work by everyone else around to keep it going. Yeah, no, I haven't looked, you know, and well, I have looked at like other biz labs, and there's great examples of ones that are grant funded. EVL is one of our favorites. They've been doing innovative stuff for 25, 30 years now. But then again, the different sort of mission where they're trying to define the next generation of technologies and grants, and so there are other models for how to make that happen. Thanks, Laura.
I was wondering, you said you started back in 1997, so we at Division started in 2004. We still have faculty that come to us that have been there for years at Purdue, and they have no idea that we existed. So we are getting better at getting, you know, the word out there. There's obviously word of mouth. You know, we're involved in more proposals, trying to collaborate more. But do you have like one or two suggestions or things that you guys did to really say, hey, we're here, this is what we do, and kind of, you know, market yourselves that really got, obviously you've grown, you know, 22 sites. I mean, that's amazing. So I was just curious.
You know, we need to do a lot better at that, because we still have the same problems. Like, oh, really? I can log into this? You know, you guys are here to help us. So, you know, we do have, you know, Rob Ping and his group, and we also have a larger ITCO thing, and we've just sort of, instead of trying to do our own viz specific thing, you know, we just embraced supercomputing for everyone, and let's go with that. We do offer workshops, which is a good way to get the word out. And then, and honestly, you know, we've done enough now where it's sort of rolling by itself. So word of mouth is happening. And I know that's not particularly helpful, you know, when you're trying to get it going, but it's probably a combination of lots of smaller things is a reality than any one particular thing that's going to help you get started or grow.
Frank has one last question, I think, then we'll
On one of the slides back there, I think it was 5 slides back when you were doing the summarizations. Yeah, next one.
This one? Or this one?
General lessons learned. And, oh, no, it wasn't that one. Well, it was either before or after that, but the point that you raised was you were having some difficulties getting buy-in from some people, from some groups, because it wasn't interactive. That VR wasn't a very interactive experience, that was one of the explanations you were coming up with for.
For with,
yeah, VR is fundamentally non-visible and non-collaborative.
Sorry. So yes. So a lot of the ways we've set up are just not already collaborative. So we've seen some good examples that you can bring collaboration in. What Jordan was talking about, that helps. And then it's not visible because, you know, you can't walk by a lab and just see people waving their arms and controlling.
Well, what I wanted to ask was, this might be violating the siloing that you had there for the categories of users, but do you have students, do you have STEAM-oriented classes using the cave-like facilities rather than the reality lab facilities?
Actually, Margaret's class actually, you know, while we have a reality lab in fine arts, they still do kind of a hybrid, so they use the head-mounted displays during the semester, but they still prefer to come and experience on the big IP wall.
I know I found that to be the case when I get a whole classroom into a cave. Oh yeah, somebody's leading the way, but everyone else is saying, well, do this, try this, what about that? And the collaboration just starts, the socialization starts happening.
Yes, and so if we pick the right tools that can work on both platforms, you know, then we can use the best of both platforms. Good point. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Eric. So Laura is up next to talk about archaeology. Yes.